Hello, welcome to Boulder Bookstore's YouTube channel. My name is Stephanie and I'm the event coordinator here at Boulder Bookstore. And today I'm going to talk about some speculative fiction. So it's books that have elements of horror or sci-fi to it but aren't really about that. These are 4 books that are really more about the human connection and the human condition and the relationships between people. And some of my favorite books, so let's get started. So first up is The Wanderers by Meg Howry, and the hardcover edition of this book was so beautiful. I'm not a huge fan of the paperback cover, and I don't know what this makes it look like, but the hardcover edition has this like beautiful starry landscape and a little astronaut with like a red umbrella. It's super pretty. Maybe Julia could put a picture of the hardcover in the corner too, just so you can see how pretty it is. But nonetheless, this is a beautiful book. The premise for this book is it's set in a not too distant future where a company that's like SpaceX is getting ready. They're preparing to send a mission to Mars that has people on it. It has actual astronauts. They want to bring them to Mars, but they're not quite ready to actually send humans to Mars yet, so they want to do sort of a test run with potentially the actual astronauts that would be going on this mission to Mars, that in the book I think is supposed to be 4 years from the beginning of the book. So they're going to do a test run in the Utah desert, but they're going to try and make it as lifelike or as real as possible. So these 3 astronauts, one is an American woman named Helen, one is a Japanese man named Yoshi, and one is a Russian man named Sergei. These 3 astronauts are going to be sort of in this capsule in the desert in Utah for 18 months, I think, just by themselves in isolation. And they're going to run through the whole program, and they're supposed to basically pretend like they're really doing this, and there's going to be a lot of simulations to make it seem like they're launching off and that they're in space, and so they're going to have to do this whole thing in basically complete isolation. So the book centers, alternates chapters essentially between the 3 astronauts and then at least one person that they're all leaving behind, essentially, that they're not going to be able to interact with for 18 months. So it's Helen's daughter, Sergei's son, and Yoshi's wife. I think they're the other 3 characters that we see. So we see kind of both sides of the, you know, the astronauts together in isolation and the extreme pressure that they're under to be in this reality and to try and make it seem like that every day they have to take these like mental health tests basically that show that they're still sane and fit, and they all know that they have to be able, they're all very aware of what the point of these tests are. So even though they're feeling all this pressure and not feeling entirely sane at times, they're filling it out the way they know that they're supposed to be filling it out. And then the people left behind, you know, feeling the loss of that person and also, you know, just going through their own things. So it's not so much about the science as it is about like all these people kind of thinking about what is real and what is their relationship to these other people, and as they evolve and just trying to figure out how to be human in these very bizarre situations. So there's a lot of parallels between things we've been going on through in the past year. Actually, I'm just realizing that another common theme between all these books is that there's sort of characters in some sort of isolation. So that's interesting. But anyway, so The Wanderers. It's a really beautifully written book. We read this for staff book club, and I think this is one of the rare books that like we all just loved this book. So highly recommend. All right. Next up, The Dog Stars by Peter Heller. Peter Heller is a local author. We love him. This book is also, this is the, Peter Heller previously, he'd been a nature writer, outdoors writer, writing about, you know, like whales and writing about kayaking and whitewater rafting and that sort of stuff. So Dog Stars was actually his first foray into fiction. And this is a little creepy because it's it's set, I think, 10 years after a flu pandemic has wiped out a lot of the population. It's also set right here in Boulder County, and a lot of the plot takes place, the main character Hig lives with a crazy gun nut one of the other few surviving people in the Erie airport, because he's got an old plane from like a Cessna from the 1950s that he uses to like fly rounds to see if there's like anyone coming to like invade their stash, because they've got, you know, food and things, and he uses this plane to like go up into the mountains so he can go fly fishing, because that's sort of a staple of Peter Heller books, is that there has to be fly fishing somewhere in it. But so again, there's characters in isolation, but it's really about like the novel starts with these very sort of abrupt, short sentences. Like you really feel like this is a guy who has not talked to many people, because it's like Bangley, I think, is the crazy guy that he lives with. Like they don't really interact well. They kind of coexist together. They're not like hanging out all chummy. It's like, so this is like a guy who has not had a lot of conversations in a while. And as the book progresses and he starts to encounter other people, you can like the way that he talks and the way that it's written like changes and evolves. It's really interesting to read, like to see this character who's been so alone finally like encountering other people and really kind of coming to realize that he needs to, you know, like he's survived and he like can live a life more than what he's been just doing for the past however many years. So it's another beautifully written book by a local author. But I will say it is a little creepy with some like seeing the landscapes of Boulder through Higgs' eyes being so desolate, and can be a lot, but it's still a really, really good read. And it does end on it ends in a hopeful way, so it's not like The Road where everything is, you know, there's hope at the end of it. So. All right, next up, another awesome local author, Stephen Graham Jones. I think I've talked about The Only Good Indians on this channel before, which is another amazing novel. He also has a new one coming out in August called My Heart is a Chainsaw. And we do actually have a page on our website where you can order signed Stephen Graham Jones books, and if you pre-order My Heart is a Chainsaw from us, you can also get a signed book. So I want to talk about, Mongrels is the first of his books that I actually read. I think this came out in 2016. But this is essentially a book about werewolves. But it's not all about werewolves. It's really about it's about a boy. It's a coming of age novel in many ways. It's about a boy who lives with his aunt and uncle who are both werewolves. He doesn't change, and he spends a lot of the book wanting to be like he wants to belong. He wants to be a part of this team that his aunt and his uncle are on. He wants to be one of them. So he spends a lot of the book kind of struggling with this who am I, and how do I fit into the world, because it's just the three of them. They live on the fringes of society. They have a hard time since, you know, the aunt and uncle are frequently, you know, they change into werewolves and they have to feed, and you know, there's a lot of tension in that. So they're frequently just on their own, and again, sort of in isolation. But a lot of it is this boy sort of trying to learn his own history, because there's a lot about, since it's only his aunt and his uncle, there's so much about himself and his past that he doesn't know, like what happened to like his parents, and you know, he knows about his grandfather, and just hearing like these stories from his family to try and put all the pieces of his life together. And it's a really beautiful, I keep saying beautiful, I feel like that's a theme with these videos. It's like we all have to pick like our word that we just continually use throughout. But it's masterfully done. Just a really great, you know, coming of age stories that involve werewolves. So fun stuff. Stephen Graham Jones is awesome. All right, my last book is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. So this is a classic of sci-fi. But I feel like if you haven't really gotten much into sci-fi and you're interested in trying, I think this is a really great place to start, because Ursula Le Guin, one of the things that she liked to do is she was I feel like a lot of sci-fi, the starting point for people is like, I want to set things on a different planet with aliens and spaceships and all sorts of crazy science. But Ursula Le Guin sort of she'd like to have like sort of thought experiments, you know. So like the premise for this book for her is, what would it be like if everyone in society was gender fluid? So this, the story for this takes place on another planet, but it is, you know, it's not crazy different aliens with different sort of, you know, it's not like crazy sci-fi stuff. It's a planet that looks and feels similar to Earth, but the people who live on this are all basically the same gender. They're all very similar, and they're sort of gender neutral until a certain time, like 2 or 3 days in the month, where they, Kemmer I think is what it's called, when they become sexually active, and they will get either male or female parts to engage in coitus. So, but the story is told from the perspective of someone from Earth, Genly I, who he is a man, and he is very foreign to them. Like, so they all kind of think he's like a sex pervert because he's always in a state ready to engage in sex. So, but the story is basically told from it's told in a way that these are like Genly's notes on his interactions with this planet. Like, they're basically like, there's, you know, a space federation, and and Genly is there to see if if this planet is ready to like join them in the Federation. So he's traveling around the planet, engaging with people. So it's really more about him sort of seeing a very different way of life, and how, and just kind of experiencing how different it is when not everything is driven by testosterone, let us say. There is, in Isolation, there is a large part in the middle where Genly is with an ambassador, and it's like just them sort of trekking through a snowy wilderness, and just them really examining each other in a way. And it's a classic for a reason. With all of that, that's the end of my recommendations, but I want to thank you all for joining us. If you like what we're doing here, we would really appreciate it if you would like this video and subscribe. And if you've got thoughts about other sorts of genres or types of books you want to hear recommendations for, let us know in the comments. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Bye.